Pierre Bourdieu. Background. Pierre Bourdieu, born on August 1st, 1930, was a French sociologist, anthropologist, and philosopher. In the 1950s, he studied and earned a degree in philosophy at École Normale Supérieure, known as one of the most prestigious teaching colleges in France. In 1956, Bourdieu was drafted by the French army and sent to Algeria. There, he studied the Kabyle people and wrote an anthropological book about his experiences, better known as Sociology de l'Algérie, which was published in 1962. This book explains the ideas of unity among the Algerian society and demonstrates their struggle with deciding to keep modern beliefs or transmute these new postmodern ideas that were currently erupting. In 1960, he returned to France and worked for a year as an assistant at the University of Paris. He attended lectures of the anthropologist Claude Lévi-Strauss at Collège de France. He also worked as an assistant to the sociologist Raymond Aron. In 1964, he became the director of studies at l'École pratique des hautes études. After being there for 4 years, he then moved to the Centre de Sociologie Européenne in 1968, where he was named the director. In 1975, he launched the interdisciplinary journal Actes de la Recherche en Sciences Sociales. In this journal, Bourdieu discusses many social concepts, including the economy of social capital. In 1981, Raymond Aron retired and Bourdieu was awarded the chair position for the Collège de France. In 1993, he was honored the Gold Medal of National Center of the Scientific Research. Within the next few years, he collected several other awards, including the Goffman Prize from the University of California. In 2002, he unfortunately passed away from cancer.
Pierre Bourdieu had many influences throughout the sociological world. Like many other sociologists, Bourdieu looked up to the greats that came before him. This included such people as Max Weber, Karl Marx, Emile Durkheim, Marcel Mauss, Claude Lévi-Strauss, Maurice Merleau-Ponty, and Ludwig Wittgenstein. While most of Bourdieu's influences, as well as popular sociological thought, were either focused on theories on the societal level, aka structure, or theories on the level of acting individuals, aka agency, and how it should be the primary focus for sociologists, Bourdieu sought to combine the influences of both sides and form a sort of medium between the two. Bourdieu shared ideas similar to Karl Marx, expressing his interest in functionalism, which is the belief that our society thrives as an ensemble of many relationships that work together rather than as individuals. He was influenced by Weber in his retention of the importance of domination and symbolic systems in social life. He also was influenced by Weber's ideas on social orders and the view that society must be analyzed in terms of more than just economic class and ideologies. This is what led Bourdieu to develop his concept of fields. From Emile Durkheim and Claude Lévi-Strauss, Bourdieu developed a structuralist view of social structures and their tendency to reproduce themselves. Though influenced by him, Bourdieu differed from Durkheim in that he focused on and emphasized the role of the social agent in enacting symbolic orders. Bourdieu was also influenced by philosopher Maurice Merleau-Ponty, and through him, Edmund Husserl. Their influence was major in helping formulate Bourdieu's focus on the body, action, and practical disposition that can be seen primarily in Bourdieu's Habitus. Austrian philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein was also an influence on Bourdieu, primarily with his theory on rule following and how it applies to multiple aspects of society.
For this next section, I will be discussing Bourdieu's concept of symbolic violence. Symbolic violence is a soft form of violence, practiced indirectly and largely through cultural mechanisms. The theory of symbolic violence seems to be rooted in Friedrich Engels' concept of false consciousness. A great example that is listed in the textbook is the educational system, which is a major institution that practices symbolic violence. The language, meanings, and symbolic system of power are used to dominate the population by those in a position of power. This seems to be more prevalent at lower levels of education, particularly grade schools and middle schools. If a student just accepted what the teacher told them, simply because it was taboo to question the teacher's knowledge, then that student was a victim of symbolic violence. So as you can see, symbolic violence is rarely ever associated with actual physical violence. The violence stems in the ability of a particular group to retain dominance in a society without resorting to physical violence. One class can dominate another class without physical violence because structures of symbolic violence convince the dominated that their domination is natural. Symbolic violence requires that the dominated accept this position. Non-English speaking immigrants who enter the educational system are victims of symbolic violence, as they are unable to learn in a classroom environment where they cannot understand the language that is being spoken. This causes many non-English speaking students at some point in their school career to enroll below their known grade level, longing and potentially disrupting their educational process. Some current researchers cite the discrepancy in achievement test scores as another form of symbolic violence practiced in the educational system. Black and Latino students score lower scores than white children, while poorer students tend to score lower than students who came from high-income families. Some of you may be familiar with the William Chambliss article, The Saints and the Roughnecks. The article follows two groups of students and documents how school teachers and principals often discipline students based merely on their appearance. Social class, race, and ethnicity can all be factors in a student's appearance. In the article, the Roughnecks are punished much more severely than the students known as the Saints. Teachers seem to look the other way when Saints skipped a class or cheated on a test, but punish the Roughnecks harshly for inferior infractions in an attempt to make an example and demonstrate their position of domination. This early impact was evident later in their lives, as many Saints graduated college and got professional jobs, while many of the Roughnecks were unable to graduate high school and some ended up in prison. By using symbols, we were able to show our power and dominance in a larger environment. An example of this would be a boss wearing a tie or a nice suit to work.
Genetic structuralism is a theory that Bourdieu comes up with that attempts to adapt both a structuralist perspective and a constructive perspective into one in order to explain social behavior. The book describes it as the study of objective structures that cannot be separated from mental structures that in themselves involve the internalization of objective structures. Essentially, Bourdieu is saying that social structures and agency both impact and constrain each other to explain social behavior. He criticizes previous theories by pointing out that they focus too much on one and ignore the other. Bourdieu argues that our behavior is not the result of either objective structures that socialize us, nor is it our own agency alone. Instead, he believes it is a mix of both. We are impacted by those objective social structures around us, and yet our agency also impacts them. Bourdieu focuses on practice, which he claims to be the outcome of the relationship between structure and agency. It is not objectively determined, nor is it the product of free will. Bourdieu, unlike other structuralists, argues that social structures exist not only in language and culture, but in the social world itself. These structures exist independent of the actors, but they guide and constrain their thoughts, behaviors, and practices.
Bourdieu's work attempts to reconcile structure and agency as external structures are internalized into the habitus while the actions of the agent externalize interactions between actors into the social relationships in the field. Bourdieu's theory, therefore, is a dialectic between externalizing the internal and internalizing the external. Habitus can be best defined as the lifestyle, values, dispositions, and expectations of particular social groups that are acquired through the activities and experiences of everyday life. In other words, habitus refers to the mental or cognitive structures through which people deal with the social world. It reflects objective divisions in the class structure, such as age groups, genders, and social classes. One's habitus is based on their objective position in the world, so someone in the same position would have a similar habitus. The habitus is socialized in a field, which is an evolving set of roles and relationships in a social domain. The world has several semi-autonomous fields, such as academic fields, religious fields, and the military.
Bourdieu argues that reality is a social concept. To exist is to exist socially, in relation to others. What is real is relational, and everyone defines himself and the world around him by marking the differences between observed phenomena. The modern Western reality, according to Bourdieu, has come into being through a process of differentiation into semi-autonomous and increasingly specialized spheres of action. He calls these spheres fields, and says that power relations between and within these fields structure human behavior. So, in order to understand how humans behave, it is important to understand in what kind of power relations they take part.
In these fields, various forms of capital, such as prestige or financial resources, are at stake. As the agent accommodates to his or her roles and relationships in the context of his or her position in the field, the agent internalizes relationships and expectations for operating in that domain. According to Bourdieu, there are 4 types of capital: economic, cultural, social, and symbolic. Economic capital refers to someone's amount of money, property, and other assets. Marx called this productive capital. Cultural capital refers to the knowledge, experiences, and connections that one has had through the life course, which enables him or her to succeed more so than someone with a different set of knowledge, experiences, and connections. This includes artistic knowledge and academic credentials. Social capital is one's network of family, friends, acquaintances, and other contacts. In other words, who you know. Symbolic capital is the resources available to an individual based on honor, prestige, or recognition. It is essentially socially recognized legitimization. Bourdieu's empirical study, Distinction, examines how aesthetic preferences plays a role in social stratification. In his research, he took surveys of French citizens from different economic and educational backgrounds and noticed how their social class seems to determine their likes and interests and how those distinctions based on social class get reinforced in everyday life.
saw the Fellini film last Tuesday. It is not one of his best. It lacks a cohesive structure. You get the feeling that he's not absolutely sure what it is he wants to say. Of course, I've always felt he was essentially a technical filmmaker. Granted, La Strada was a great film. Great in its use of negative imagery more than anything else. But that central cohesive core, that must lead through an artist's work, leading from one to the other.
Screaming his opinions in my
You
ear.
understand what I'm talking about? Like all that Juliet of the Spirits or Satyricon. I found it incredibly indulgent. He really is. He's one of the most indulgent filmmakers. He really is. And without